right, let's make sure we get that going. All right, so welcome to our webinar today covering the general surgery EPAs. We'll review the general surgery EPAs and how to utilize them in my evaluations. And we will cover a comprehensive review of what your faculty, your residents, and you as program managers and program directors will do in my evaluations for managing all your work. We'll also discuss the relationship between my evaluations and the American Board of Surgery, and in order to help you better understand and minimize your concerns about redundancy of data entry or any of the other concerns that many program directors and program managers have had, and we want to make sure we address all of that. We will record this webinar and make it available to you on the My Help menu. We'll cover that as well, and you'll receive an email notification on it. The objectives for today, I don't think we're going to utilize the full hour and a half unless there are questions and answers that carry us over longer. We're going to review the 18 general surgery EPAs, the ABS position on using my evaluations instead of simple, implementation of the EPAs into assessment forms, how residents can initiate the assessments for the faculty to complete on them, how attendings can trigger ad hoc assessments to complete on the residents. We'll review the general surgery EPA integrations into the ACGME General Surgery 2.0 milestones, as well as generating EPA progress reports and monitoring trainee progress and any other general reports that we think would be useful for you to be familiar with. It's important to note that the process of the general surgery EPAs will also be replicated for other boards, not boards, but other specialties that are under the ABS, vascular surgery, complex surgical oncology, pediatric surgery, trauma, burn, and surgical critical care. All of these specialties under the ABS will also adopt the same EPA format. So for those of you who are joining this call from the GME, this concept and the way we're doing things will not be limited just to general surgery. You're going to see it replicated against some of the other specialties that fall under the ABS as well. So let's have a quick review of the general surgery EPAs and understanding what those EPAs specifically are. Well, first of all, what is all this about? Well, a few years ago, the American Board of Surgery started laying out the foundation for moving into entrustable professional activities, and as of July of 2023, the ABS has taken the position to move completely into a competency-based assessment format of the surgical trainees. And what that means is for all of your interns that start this year, so everyone who started in July of 2023, all of your interns will be required to submit a composite report to the ABS at the end of their 5 years in order to be able to sit the general surgery qualifying examination. So what happens to your second, third, fourth, and fifth years who are with you now? Nothing. They're not required to submit anything directly to the ABS. When I say we, I mean the ABS, and our position is parallel to the ABS. The ABS position is your second, third, fourth, and fifth year residents now should still be involved in the EPA so that you can start to become more familiar with the process as you're moving along. We've done everything that we can from our side to make sure your work is as streamlined as possible. There is extensive information about the EPAs on the ABS surgery website, and there's an FAQ section you can review as well at your convenience for more information about EPAs. So an EPA stands for Entrustable Professional Activity, and many of you may not be familiar with the relationships of the EPAs to competencies and milestones. So I want you to basically understand that when you think about the 6 core competencies that the ACGME defined back 26 years ago, those represent a broad foundational domain of learning. We talk about patient care, medical knowledge, system-based practices, practice-based learning, professionalism, and interpersonal communication skills. These are just broad domains. When we think about EPAs, these are much more about observable activities. And an EPA is not a single competency, but it's made up of multiple competencies. I like to use the analogy of a driver's license as an EPA. When you get a driver's license, you are entrusted to drive a motor vehicle. You are not entrusted to drive a truck, an 18-wheeler truck. If you want to drive an 18-wheeler truck, you need to get a separate entrustment, a separate license for driving a truck. And so think about a driver's license is a test of your knowledge. It's how much do you know about the rules of the road. It's a test of your ability to be able to manage your vehicle. Can I put gas in my car? Do I know where the gas is, the brake, the clutch if I'm driving a manual car? Do I know how to put air in my tires? Do I know the rules of the road? Do I drive in a professional manner? Do I communicate honk appropriately? Notice that there are different competencies involved of knowledge, of professionalism, of communication skills, and the idea of actually driving, which we would call in medicine patient care. And in contrast to milestones, milestones represent a description of how I'm progressing across a timeline. I started my milestones in a particular activity at a novice level, and I worked my way up to being competent, and then proficient, and then an expert. So it's a progression along a timeline. If I have reached a particular milestone, it does not mean that I can be entrusted to do something. It just means I have progressed to a point on one activity that I'm a novice or competent or expert. So EPAs are not synonymous with competencies, and EPAs, it's important that you understand that they translate competencies into everyday practice, and EPAs are directly observable. I can see whether someone can do something, so I call that an entrustment that someone has taken up. EPAs provide for a new opportunity now where we can actually use these entrustments to identify gaps in existing assessments. We can actually educate the evaluators, the faculty with expected behaviors on things that they are actually doing. So faculty that are involved in pre-patient care prior to a case, faculty that are involved in the actual intraoperative phase or the post-operative phase, we're actually able to get the faculty involved in understanding the actual behaviors that are expected and collect that information in a much more meaningful, streamlined manner, in contrast to the evaluations that we've had to do for years that were more cumbersome, and surgical faculty were always complaining about that. So the expectation from the ABS has been improved evaluator compliance and the ability to update the goals and objectives to link them directly to EPAs as well. So there are in total 18 EPAs. I don't expect you to be able to read the screen that I have up. I just want you to understand that there are a total of 18 EPAs that are effective starting July 1 of 2023. These EPAs cover all of the systems in general surgery. Now, each one of these EPAs has 3 phases. This is very critical, and this came about as a follow-up conversation that I've been having with the ABS and Dr. John Mullinger, who's been my point of contact and your liaison for the EPA implementation, it is very important that we understand that those EPAs, each one of them will have 3 phases. Therefore, each individual EPA actually is made up of 3 separate EPAs. So if we're looking at the EPA on abdominal wall hernia evaluation and management, that entrustment has a non-operative / preoperative component, has an intraoperative phase, and a post-operative phase. Therefore, each assessment form is made up of 3 separate EPA assessment questions. So the ABS wants an assessor, a faculty, to be able to rate the resident on the phase that they actually interacted with. So if they interacted just on the non-operative preoperative assessment of a patient, then only assess that component. If you were only in the OR with the resident, then only evaluate the intraoperative component versus the postoperative component. And if, let's say, with something like flexible GI endoscopy, that might be something where the faculty is involved in all 3 phases. In that case, they will do an assessment of all 3 phases. Now, each phase is also rated separately on a 1 to 4 scale, which we'll review in more detail. So this is the general structure of the surgical EPAs. Now let's talk a little bit about the ABS position on my evaluations and how all this works, because there's been a lot of confusion about this in the arena, and folks aren't sure exactly what they need to do and what the double service might have to be. I've had a detailed discussion about this with the ABS. As I said, my point of contact is Dr. John Mellinger. His email is here as well in case you want to reach out to him if you have any questions. I've spent an extensive amount of time having discussions with the ABS and John. I've attended all the webinars and town hall meetings of the ABS, and I have a very good idea of what the ABS expectations are in the short run and in the long run. And because of all my involvement, I also know how they want the data to be presented both now and in the future. And it's very important that you understand that the ABS is absolutely agnostic about how the EPA data is collected. They certainly have provided a solution for the data collection with the simple SIMPL, but by no means is that something that anyone is obligated to utilize. What we've done in my evaluations integrates everything in one place, as I will go through it, so that you don't have to do separate data collection and say separate data reporting. And I want you to have confidence that you will have a mechanism to be able to upload your data to the ABS infrastructure to access the data in their dashboards for benchmarking purposes. This is something the ABS is still working on. So you are involved right now at the starting point of what the ABS is doing, not at the finish line. And please understand that your residents are not going to have to generate any reports until 2028. So it's only for your interns that are starting now that they're going to be involved in the data reporting process. So the bottom line here is you should have full confidence that you'll be able to do everything that you need to do from A to Z for purposes of ABS and for purposes of managing your programs and making sure that you have a good educational trajectory on everything that you're doing. Now let's talk about the implementation of the general surgery EPAs into assessments and how that works. So an assessment is essentially made up of a level of complexity question and an EPA with its 3 phases. So we'll look at this in live in just a minute. So Whether we're looking at this on the website where we have the question on how complex was the case, and the actual EPA with the scope and the expected behaviors, or we're looking at the 3 different phases of each EPA. This is the general format of each assessment form. This is what the format is going to look like, or does look like on the mobile interface. And we're going to look at that as well and review it in live format together. So on the mobile device, there's a case complexity question. Then there is the EPA itself with the 4 levels of the EPA, and all of the expected behaviors are directly mapped not only to the ACGME milestones, but directly mapped to the EPA as well. And there's a hyperlink for being able to download and review the expected behaviors as well. And as I said, we're going to look at this in detail together right now. So here, as an example, I am logged in as a faculty, Dr. Rebecca Pope, into my evaluations on the website. And in this instant, I already have an evaluation that I have assigned to myself. I'm going to look at the abdominal hernia evaluation and management. We're going to go ahead and click on evaluate. Just the point right now is just to be able to have a chance to look at the actual assessment form and see what it looks like. And I'll make the screen larger so everyone can see the question. So here's how complex was the case, straightforward, moderate, or complex. So that's our case complexity question. And then this particular EPA has the new format. The current EPAs that are in your database have the format with the single EPA question. This particular is a new format that you'll have available to you next week that's broken down into the 3 phases. So this is the EPA on the non-operative preoperative phase of the abdominal wall hernia evaluation. It tells the evaluator here, review expected behaviors. If they click on this, it actually opens up a hyperlink to a PDF document. The PDF document has 3 pages. The first page, this talks about the behavior anchors for abdominal wall hernia evaluation and management. The ABS has defined 4 levels of behavior. And for each EPA, there are 3 phases. So for the non-operative phase, level 1, they have defined these 4 behaviors that are expected to be seen. So if a resident exemplifies these 4 behaviors, we say they have achieved level 1. If they have exemplified these behaviors, then we can say that they've exemplified level 2. So the ABS has defined these behaviors for identifying level 1 through 4 for the non-operative component. And if we go down to the next page, we can see there is an intraoperative phase. And for that intraoperative phase, they've defined specific behaviors. And the last component is the post-operative phase, and they have defined specific behaviors for the post-operative phase. So here, the evaluator is expected to rate the resident's non-operative preoperative phase of abdominal wall hernia evaluation and management. Now, they can either look at that PDF I showed you, or they can expand the details to review and rate individual curricular milestones. So if they expand this, they can actually see the expected behaviors for each one of the levels here. So they're available here, they're available in the PDF for them to look at. Either way, our expectation is that you have a responsibility for faculty development. For your faculty who is involved in abdominal wall hernia evaluation and management, they need to know and understand what the expected behaviors are for each level. They need to know which cases are in scope and which cases are out of scope as defined by the ABS. And then they have an abbreviated format of limited participation, direct supervision, indirect supervision, or practice ready, where they have to rate the resident on what they are ready to do for the non-operative component. And then below that, you'll have the intraoperative component or phase of the abdominal wall hernia evaluation and management. Now, for the intraoperative phase, there are intraoperative behaviors. Again, they can click on the hyperlink to review the intraoperative behaviors component separately, or they can expand the details and look at that here. And then the third EPA component is the post-operative phase. And that post-operative phase has its own set of behaviors. So up to here, we have defined the format of the assessment. The current format that you all have in your accounts, which you can start using right away, it's not a problem at all. Your current format is made up of a single EPA. And this is what, I selected the wrong one. Let's pick another one. We'll do the GI endoscopy. Your current format has a single EPA. So one EPA that encompasses all three phases. After the discussion with John yesterday, and we've been talking very regularly, the ABS is going in the direction of wanting to measure the three phases separately. So they don't want it as a single assessment that covers all three phases, but they want them broken down into three separate phases. So in reality, you have 18 EPAs times 3, or you have 54 separate EPAs that are being measured, except they are all in 18 assessments. So the worst case scenario is a faculty has to answer 4 questions on an evaluation form, but those 4 questions will have multiple curricular milestones associated with them. Each one of these individual bullet points are going to be directly mapped to the ACGME subcompetencies, and they will be directly mapped to the general surgery EPAs. So on the mobile environment, let's take a quick look at that. So here, when I log into the mobile environment, I'll go into that same assessment form. Again, I'm emulating this on a web interface just to show you. So I have a question here about case complexity, and they have a radio button where they can essentially move it to whatever the particular level is of the case complexity. And here they have the actual EPA question. And as they go through and they select a particular rating, because there's extensive text here, they'll actually have a horizontal bar that will come up. And if you notice the colors that are displayed here with the orange, the purple, and the blue and green, these colors correspond directly to these colors here. So we have everything color coded, and these colors correspond to the exact colors that the ABS has set up as well. So the review expected behaviors are accessible on the mobile app as well. And you can see in this example, you have the intraoperative listed separately. So they'll rate the intraoperative separately, and then the postoperative will be rated separately as well. So each Each individual EPA group will have 3 phases, and faculty will be expected to answer the 3 phases. And if they did not interact, they would simply select the option did not observe. So this shows you the expected format that you can expect to see on the mobile interface, as well as on the web interface. So let's talk about accessing and assigning assessments by trainees, faculty, and admins. What is the process? How will this work? Now, all of you, you certainly know that you have access to My Help, but please, if you look at the webinar, there is a handout section, and I've attached 3 handouts for you. There's a handout on general surgery EPAs attending. There's another one, general surgery EPAs residents, and there's another one that just says general surgery EPAs. The general surgery EPAs document is an extensive document that I'm pulling up here just to run you through it, that covers all the details, including what are the 18 general surgery EPAs and what have we done with them, what are the options for residents to assign evaluations to attendings, what are the options for attendings to self-assign. Everything that I'm reviewing with you is within this document, as well as EPA reports, which I'm going to cover with you during this webinar, as well as how to create custom EPA reports, how to generate summary performance evaluation reports, how you can look at your EPA performance graphically, and how it's integrated into the performance dashboard, which I will cover with you during this webinar as well. And all the other details that I'm covering with you is within this document. The other 2 handouts that are already available to your residents and faculty under My Help are documents that you could distribute to your residents and your faculty. This is the resident guide. So the resident guide talks about assigning EPA evaluations to attendings. There is resident instructions and attending instructions, and notice that there are QR codes here that they can just scan with their mobile phones to download the mobile app. And here the residents get instructions on how they can assign an evaluation to the faculty, and I will cover that with you. And their document also includes details about what are EPAs, what is the purpose of the EPAs, what are the 18 general surgery EPAs. So we've tried to help your residents in understanding what are these requirements, what is the format of an EPA assessment form, how does it look like on the mobile app, how to download the mobile app, and what are the evaluation details for each one of the assessments about limited participation, direct supervision, indirect supervision, and ready for independent practice. And there are additional evaluation features that are discussed, including accessing the expected behaviors, expanding to see the details, and how they can use the microphone on the telephone for the faculty to be able to dictate their comments instead of having to type them out. And the last handout that I've included for you are instructions for attendings and how attendings can access this information and how they can do a voluntary or ad hoc evaluation on the resident. So going back to our presentation, there are essentially 3 options for assigning evaluations. The first option will be the option you will most likely use most of the time. This option requires residents to assign evaluations to the attending. And we're going to go through that process. It's really very straightforward. So let's look at this process on a mobile device. So I'm going to log off of this mobile device, and we can log in as a resident just to look at this. So we'll log in as a resident. And this is what I see in the system. I'm going to click on complete evaluations. At the very top of the screen, I click on voluntary. And then I want to do a requested evaluation. So notice these are all the different types of voluntary evaluations I can do. And specifically, I want to do a requested attending of resident evaluation. So this is covered in detail for the residents in the resident instruction document I've already given you. So they click on requested attending of resident evaluation, and automatically the system has today's date in there. They don't have to select a rotation name, that's optional. So all they need to do is they need to select an evaluation. And all of these evaluation forms are already listed and available right now to all your residents. They're listed with a prefix of EPA with a colon, followed by the name of the actual evaluation form. So when they select that particular evaluation form, so we'll do the benign anorectal disease evaluation, the next thing they do is they select the attending. So I'm going to select Rebecca Pope, and then I click next, and it says evaluation assigned successfully. So Dr. Pope, if Dr. Pope has already installed the My Evaluations app on his or her phone, Dr. Pope will receive a notice on her phone that she has an evaluation assigned to her. Now, Dr. Pope can log into her account, and under complete evaluations, we'll see a list of all the evaluations that are listed here. And today, the 25th of July, we can see there is that benign anorectal disease evaluation that Miranda Bailey has assigned to me. So I select that particular evaluation would work. So this is what we call a resident assigning an evaluation to the attending. And then we have the option of attending self-assignments as well. The attending would select the same idea to go to the menu option, complete evaluations, click on voluntary, and do an attending of resident evaluation. They have exactly the same criteria that they can select the particular EPA that they want to complete. I'll go ahead and select a gallbladder, and then they would select the name of the resident. We'll select Meredith Gray, and they would click next. And this process will then, they are self-assigning, or they're doing what's called an ad hoc evaluation on the resident. So either of these would be done in. So let's look at the detailed setup here that I reviewed with you. On the requested attending of resident, this is the most common option that you'll be using. You can see essentially it's 5 steps. The resident clicks on complete evaluations. They tap on the voluntary tab. They select their requested attending of resident tab. They select the evaluation. They select the name of the faculty they're assigning it to. They'll get a confirmation message, and that's the end of it. On the attending side, they click on complete an evaluation. They select the voluntary tab. Attending of resident, they select the evaluation form, the name of the resident they're evaluating. They click next, and they're able to complete that evaluation. So in contrast to evaluations that you're normally assigning as the evaluator, where you're able to actually go into the system and assign these evaluations, these assessment forms are actually not done as evaluation assignments that you're assigning. They are supposed to be observational assessments following an actual observation. So the attending and the resident have worked with one another on a case, either before the case or during the case or after the case, and it's supposed to be observed and completed immediately. These should not be lingering for days to be completed. As a matter of fact, the ABS wants to put a 10-hour limit, and after 10 hours, an EPA would would self-destruct and would no longer be acceptable to be submitted. So be very mindful of how much time is being spent to complete these. They should be done immediately after an interaction. I don't recommend that you assign these evaluations. I recommend option 1 as the best choice. Now, all the general surgery EPAs have been integrated with the ACGME General Surgery 2.0 milestones. What I'm covering with you is content that was adopted from Dr. Bradford Mitchell at Bay Health GME. So I took some of the work that he's presented as well and integrated it in here for a general understanding. So here we're looking at the general surgery milestone subcompetencies, the 4 patient care subcompetencies, 2 medical knowledge, and 3 system-based practice subcompetencies. What Dr. Mitchell did is outlined the benefits of those those subcompetencies and how they relate to specific assessment types. So using H&P assessments and consult assessments are very, very good for patient evaluation and decision-making milestones. And you can see that in this case, all of the 18 EPAs are tied back to PC1. You can see EPAs dealing with abdominal wall hernia repair. These are just abbreviations of the various EPAs. Some of the EPAs are tied back to PC2. You can see down here the EPA, the colon EPA and the trauma EPA are tied back to system-based practice number 1. In contrast, for professionalism number 3, which is administrative tasks, none of the EPAs offer any information there. So the expectation there is you're going to get things from the CCC's assessment, from the program manager's assessment of the resident, end of rotation assessments, and end of program assessments that are going to give you information regarding professionalism number 3 for the milestones. So the idea here for you is generally understand that all of your 18 EPAs have already been tied back to the ACGME subcompetencies. And what that means is when you're using the curricular assessment worksheet in My Evaluations, you can rest assured that you are going to have access to that information directly in My Evaluations, which means all the EPAs that are being done in My Evaluations, the data is going to come right back to your CCC. You don't have to do double data entry there at all. So here I'm going into a sample general surgery program. I'm going under the menu option Evaluations. And on the far right-hand side under the curricular and milestone management section, when I go to the curricular assessment worksheet, you all should be using the curricular assessment worksheet for managing your clinical competency committees. And every resident that I select, the system will automatically take all the data from those EPAs and it's already been mapped onto the ACGME subcompetencies, and it allows us to see a direct performance on the resident. So in this case, I have data on this resident going back from the last academic year where we were doing trial runs on the EPAs. So as I go through, I can see the resident's provisional performances at a level 3. I can expand the details here, and I can see, for example, that Dr. Pope did an abdominal wall hernia evaluation back in March on this resident, did another abdominal wall, did an acute abdomen on this resident. So the data from each one of these EPAs is already directly mapped, and it allows your clinical competency committee to actually pull up each one of these individual assessments that were done to actually review the assessment and to see, okay, how was this resident ranked on this particular EPA? What is their individual scores? And what is the attending score that he or she tends to give on the assessment form? And to review each one of those individually on the resident. So here I can pull up a separate one and look at each one of these individually. So this is the tying back. There's nothing left for you to have to do in terms of mapping these individual EPAs. So the next component of this is for you to be able to generate EPA progress reports and monitoring your trainees' progress. So we have already provided 2 templated reports for you that are available under your menu option for reports, favorite reports, and they're listed as EPA completion report and the EPA progress report for 23-24. So the EPA completion history report, so if I just turn back here, I'm going to go to the menu option reports. And on the left-hand side, under favorite reports, I can see I have an EPA completion history and an EPA progress report. The EPA completion history report allows us to look at each resident's performance on each EPA over the course of all years. So data from all the years is collected so I can see how they performed over time. So the way these reports have been set up, they're inclusive of all of your residents. So you can always customize these reports to your specific needs. We've just preset them up to make it easy for you. For each individual EPA, you're going to get multiple bits of information. You see the performance of the individual resident. You can see a department target. These are department targets where we've already set up expectations based on the ABS expectations of the trajectory of your resident. And you can see a group average. This is where residents in the same PGY level are, how they are performing in your department. And you have the ability to actually set personal targets. And that's something we'll discuss in the next webinar we'll have in the future on that particular detail. So this will list each one of the individual EPAs. You can see there, the report will actually load up as I'm going through, listing each of the EPAs and the details of that resident's performance over time. The next report that we provided for you is the EPA progress report. This is a way for you to review each resident's performance on each EPA over the course of a single training year. How did this resident do for this current academic year? It's a month-by-month display of their performance, and you can certainly generate this report manually. We've created one for you already, so if you go under the menu option reports, expand the favorites, it's listed as the EPA progress report. Again, this report is set up based on your current residents for the current academic year. And you want to learn how to run the curricular milestone report for your own benefit. And this report is just like the previous report I showed you, except this is showing details here month by month for you to be able to see how did this resident perform. In this case, I don't have any data for the current academic year on this resident. So for the current academic year, this resident hasn't performed any of these particular EPAs. So you can see the other data points here are the group average, the department target, where we expect them to be, and the personal target as well. So these are the 2 main reports that are there for your progress. I can tell you that you can expect more reports coming out in the next month. And as the ABS refines their expectations for what they expect at the end of 5 years in 2028, we'll certainly have those reports that will meet the ABS reporting requirements, which are still being developed by the APS, we'll have those available for you as well. Now, I want to review a little bit about some additional reporting functionalities that you have to be able to get a bird's eye view of your residents' performance. Under the main page where you log into your account, my screen looks a little bit different, but you have a performance dashboard. And under that performance dashboard, you're able to select any one of your trainees. And I'm going to zoom in on this just to be able to focus on the critical parts over here. Focusing on the performance for Miranda Bailey, notice that it's defaulted to the current academic year. I can select all years. I also have an option of selecting, let's say, the last academic year. And what this performance dashboard does, it actually pulls up all of their core competency performance, their milestone performance, and their EPA performance. So all of their EPAs are listed here. So I can zoom in by clicking on the magnifying glass, and I can hover over this, and I can see where Miranda's performance is on each one of the EPAs, and I can see how specific EPAs have not been pursued while some EPAs have been pursued. So you have that option of generating a performance dashboard as well. Another report that would be very useful for you to utilize is accessible under the menu option Reports. Now, when you go to the menu option Reports, right here under the Evaluation Management Reports, you have the Resident Report section. Now, as you scroll down, you're going to see each one of the EPAs will be listed with a graphical layout of how your residents are performing by PGY level. So I can switch to last academic year, and I can see for last academic year how the residents are performing on the individual EPAs. Now, this is a dynamic graph, so I can actually click on the graph, and it will actually bring up the details here for that particular EPA, and it will give me a breakdown by PGY level in terms of level of performance by PGY. Now, this is just a way for you to get a quick bird's eye view of how your department is performing with regards to the EPAs. Another very useful report for the EPAs is the Summary Resident Performance Evaluation Report. Now, in this report, I'm going to just go ahead and select a couple of residents, and I'm going to scroll down here. In step 2, I can select multiple evaluation forms. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to select the first EPA evaluation. I could scroll down all the way to the last one, hold the Shift key on my keyboard and click the thyroid, and that will select all those EPAs for me. And I can add all of those to generate a report on those EPAs performed on these 2 residents for all years or for a single academic year. And I can run a report, so I'm just running it on a single academic year. And the benefit of this report, it's going to show me a very big picture of how those residents are performing in regards to each one of those EPAs. And when did they do those EPAs? How many of those EPAs have they done altogether? And I get a very big bird's eye view, as well as having access to any narratives that were written would be listed here as well. It just in this case, there are no narratives available. So going back to the filters on this report, at the very bottom here, evaluation comments are not included by default. So I choose to include those, and I just want to see the evaluation comments. I don't need to see any of the other comments. I can click OK, and I get that same report, and I can actually see the narratives that were written by Dr. Henry Burton, for example, didn't write any comments. Dr. Rebecca Pope wrote overall excellent work, or good with surgical and patient management. So whatever comments are there are available, so you get not only the benefit of seeing the actual evaluations and when they were done, but also how they're performing on each one of those assessment forms. So that summarizes all of the additional reports that are available as well. And I want to take any questions at this point. Give me a second and let me open up. Okay, so Dr. Goldser, you asked, when will programs have to start sending info into ACGME or ABS? So none of this information needs to go to the ACGME. The ACGME has absolutely nothing to do with this. This is all purely American Board of Surgery. The American Board of Surgery does not expect any information to be sent to them until the graduating class of 2028. That means this will only impact the interns that are starting July 1, that started July 1 of 2023. Oh, do you need to map anything? Nope, we took care of everything. Melinda, the only thing you need to do is to make sure that your residents and your faculty get a hold of the handouts that I put into the handout section. That's the most important part. And you want to get people to start using the assessments. And as I mentioned to you, next week, we are updating all the EPAs. They have 3 phases. They currently only have 1 phase, meaning it's one summative, covers all 3 phases. After my call with the ABS with Dr. John Mellinger yesterday, we are changing it to have 3 phases, as I showed you in the example. That will be available for you next week. But the only thing you have to do is make sure those instructions get into the hands of your residents and your faculty, and they start doing what they need to do. Okay, if there are no further questions, then we can call an end to the webinar for today. If you have any follow-up questions that you didn't ask, feel free to reach out to me, david@myevaluations.com. Really appreciate your attendance to the webinar today, and wish you a wonderful rest of the week, and look forward to connecting with you in the near future. Be well. Bye-bye.